Julie Condliffe here. Thank you so very much for joining me again today on the Creative Legal's Property Investment Lawyers platform, a platform where we help you with all the legal aspects of your property investment journey. I'm so excited to be talking to you today about buying a property at auction. We all know that auction purchases have now increased in popularity recently. So you've got many ways of buying a property at auction. You've got your online auctions, your in-house auctions, your telephone bidding, loads of different ways to buy a property at auction. Most people find that, or most people are of the view that auction purchases are complicated and risky, and that they should only be attempted by maybe the more experienced investors. That is true to a degree, but I'm hoping to be able to bring a lot more clarity on that subject matter. Of course, buying a property at auction is risky. There's no doubt about that, particularly if you end up having no money to be able to complete, or if you bump into more onerous obligations than you had envisaged, or it may be that the property is in a worse off condition than you had imagined. So there are quite a lot of things that could go wrong with a property auction, but there are also a lot more things that could go right with a property auction. So let's hop right into the 7-step guide of buying a property at auction. So first things first, money matters. Show me the money. Have you got the money? Okay, now this is serious business because most people want to buy a property at auction utilizing a mortgage. That is a possibility, but the risk here is if you've got a decision in principle, that is great. Only as a starting point, we need to realize that a decision in principle is by no means a guarantee that you will get the funding, that you will get the mortgage to complete in a timely manner, to complete within that 28-day period, to complete within that 14-day period. And you also need to take into account matters such as the valuation. How long is that going to take? When is the bank or when is the lender going to instruct the valuer? We also have to consider things such as retentions. If you get a mortgage, what if the valuation reveals substantial matters, things that will require all extensive works, in which case perhaps the lender would be minded to request a retention. Have you accounted for that? So those are some of the matters that you really need to think about. So in my experience, I would discourage people from trying to rely on a mortgage if you are buying at auction. But we know that things continue to change, lenders' positions continue to change, finances and other finance options are available. I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not at liberty to discuss or recommend any products, but I'd be more than happy to put you in touch with people who may be able to help. But the first step, or one of the most important things, is have you got the money to buy this property? Because you don't want to end up in a set of circumstances where you've made the bid and it is successful, and then you end up losing the deposit monies that you've paid, and potentially you'll be liable for damages in addition to the deposit funds that you've paid, simply because you were trying to rely on a mortgage that did not materialize because you had a decision in principle and you thought that a decision in principle is a final agreement. It is not a commitment to give you a mortgage. So that is very, very important to note. Most people buying at auction use different forms of funding, and some people use cash. So if you've got cash stashed somewhere, then that would be brilliant, and then perhaps you don't need to concern yourself greatly in relation to this particular point. The next point relates to auction documentation. When it comes to auctions, the seller has to prepare all the documentation prior. So ordinarily a seller would prepare the contractual package, and then the buyer would carry out the searches. But when it comes to an auction, the seller does all of that. So the seller would be expected to have the contractual documentation prepared. Additionally, the seller would also go as far as doing what a buyer would ordinarily do in relation to carrying out the searches. So the seller would utilize a specialist firm of solicitors like Creative Legals. Just simply go on creativelegals.com and then you'll find details on there of how to contact us, and the details are also at the bottom of the screen. So the seller would contact their own preferred solicitors, or sometimes the auctioneers will recommend a firm of solicitors who they ordinarily use. The solicitors would then draft the contractual paperwork, which is commonly referred to as the legal pack. So the legal pack will include documentation such as title documentation by way of official copies, land registry and local searches, special conditions of sale, property information forms, fixtures and fittings forms, management information, leases if relevant, tenancy agreements if applicable, planning permission documentation if relevant. These documents are prepared by the seller's solicitors. So those are the documents that are commonly included in an auction legal pack. As a buyer, I think you should be more concerned about the documents missing from an auction pack rather than the documents in an auction pack. I'll discuss this in a bit more detail. Of course, it would be prudent to review all the documentation provided in the auction pack, the auction legal pack. Very, very important, that is. That's why, again, you would benefit from expert solicitors like Creative Legals to check that you don't have any onerous restrictive covenants, onerous special conditions, additional payments that perhaps you were not mindful of, or you wouldn't have picked up yourself. So that is really important. But when I say that you should be more concerned about the missing documents, is because this could be the reason why the property is being sold at auction. There are loads of different reasons why properties are sold at auction, and sometimes there's some pertinent documents that are needed, and if those documents are not available, the easiest way of selling the property may be selling the property at auction. So when you're buying a property at auction, it is imperative that you go through all the documentation with a fine-tooth comb. But not just that, you should also be concerned if there are any relevant documents that are missing. That is why I insist on the need to get a properly experienced property auction solicitor to help you. Right, step number 3, or point number 3, you also need to be alert to the fact that identity checks will be carried out. Most auctioneers will need to do that. As lawyers, one of the first steps when we take on new clients is for us to confirm that you are who you say you are. And we do this by carrying out identity checks, and we also carry out anti-money laundering checks. Insurance liability is important. It's important for the seller, and is also equally important for the buyer. As a seller, you want to ensure that the property is insured until exchange of contracts has been effected. As a buyer, you want to make sure that your insurance kicks in from the time of exchange of contracts. For a seller, as an additional buffer, it may be that you keep the property insured until it has completed, but insurance is very, very important. You hear, and I've come across many horrific stories about insurance matters. For example, or indeed hypothetically, say you're a seller or even a buyer regardless of, which side of the fence you're on. So you're at auction, hammer goes down, exchange of contracts is effected. The seller is far away from the buyer. The property then becomes vandalized and set on fire. It's burnt down prior to completion. Where does the liability lie? Who's going to pick up responsibility for that? These stories happen. So insurance liability, just know which side of the fence you're on and make sure that you are insured. Right, and then the next step relates to a buyer. The searches that you as a buyer would need to carry out. As stated before, your primary searches should be included in the seller's auction pack, but not all solicitors are as great as Creative Legals. So you might not have all your searches included. So standard searches or standard search package should include searches such as your local authority searches, your environmental searches, your drainage and water searches. So based on the information in the local authority search and indeed the location in which you're looking to buy, you may want to carry out additional searches of the property or indeed the surrounding area. So your environmental search determines the risk of flooding and the proximity of any waste sites or potentially contaminated areas in the vicinity of that property. Then you've got your drainage and water search. A water search reveals whether the property is connected to mains water supply and drainage. So those are the basic ones, but then you've got some other geography dependent searches like your coal mining search. This would be recommended in areas with a history of coal mining. The reports provide information of past, present and future coal mining activities and can reveal issues of ground stability, land contamination and evidence of any subsidence. Then you've got your commons registration search. This can establish whether the land is registered as common land in accordance with the Commons Registration Act. If your property is located in Cheshire, you may want to do a Cheshire mining search. And again, this is location dependent. There are a lot more searches which I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about. They'll be listed on an article on our website and the link will be provided to you. The next step relates to doing your due diligence. It is imperative that you do your own digging. Due diligence means doing your own digging, doing your property search, doing your own homework before placing a bid. Because once you've done that, there's no turning back if your bid is successful. So due diligence includes carrying out checks of the property itself, so carrying out a physical inspection of the property. This is a hard limit, an absolute must. You must carry out an inspection of the property. You want to be able to ascertain the state and condition of repair, as you will take the property as it is, warts and all. So any defects, latent, patent, inherent or otherwise, you will be relying on the legal principle, buyer beware, caveat emptor. You want to establish the requisite remedial works required. So your due diligence includes going through other matters already discussed, including reviewing the legal pack, checking the title documentation, going through the searches, reviewing the special conditions of sale and all other relevant related paperwork. You may also want to do things that seem basic but yet important. So things like finding out from the neighbors why the property is up for sale, things like finding out from estate agents, because some properties may have been listed with estate agents prior to the auction. So it may be that you could find out a bit more information about the history of the property. How long has it been on the market for? Are there any issues with the actual property or the surrounding area? There's quite a lot of information that you can find out if you ask the right questions and ask the right people. When you buy at auction, the contract becomes legally binding at the drop of the gavel. So do all your due diligence prior, do all your homework prior, make sure your finances are in order prior. Everything that you need to do, or at least the majority of the things that need to be done, ought to be done before the bid. That is important. Completion really depends on the auction house. It depends on, I say auction house to a degree, but really depends on the special conditions. It could be 10 days, it used to be 14 days, but now it's commonly 28 days. That's when it takes place. Now, if you're not in a position to complete by the completion due date, then you need to start sweating. You need to get worried. You need to get very worried, because you could be served with a notice to complete, giving you 10 days to complete. And if you fail to complete within that 10-day period, the whole contract could be rescinded. And if the contract is rescinded, you may end up losing your deposit, whatever deposit you'd paid. If you'd paid less than 10%, the remainder becomes automatically due. But in addition to that, you may also face damages, and damages are to put the vendor back in the position he would have been in had this transaction completed. So that means if there are any ancillary losses, you'll be accountable for that. So I don't think you want to be in such a scenario, which is why you need creative legals to help you get it right from the outset. There is a link at the bottom of the screen and in the comments for you to contact us for a free consultation if you need any guidance. Stay tuned for the next video, for the next audio, where we discuss various aspects of your property investment journey. Until next time.